So last week we were talking about the secret hidden history of secret societies. And we are continuing today to discuss this as we look at the secret version of Christianity that was banned by the church. And this version of Christianity is called Gnosticism, and it is interesting indeed. It was considered heresy, a blasphemy, and it still is considered heresy by the church because Gnostic Christianity is something that still exists to this day. So what we are going to be looking at today is this system that was in place that, and like I said, many people still do follow Gnostic Christianity today. That is a very, you know me. We are completely and totally opposed to mainstream Christianity, but Gnostic Christianity is brilliant indeed. There are many different versions of Gnostic Christianity, so that kind of muddies the waters when trying to talk about it singularly. However, many Gnostics believed that the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Bible, was actually Satan, what they called the Demiurgus, or Yaldabaoth, and was an evil god that created the material world and then trapped souls from the realm of divine light, called the Pleroma, into this material world to power his infernal creation. And so it was then the goal of the Gnostics to try and revolt against this evil satanic god and try to achieve what they called Gnosis. Gnosis means knowledge, to escape this material hell and return to the Pleroma, the realm of divine light. And there were many, again, I said, many different versions of Gnosticism. Some Gnostics believed that they should try and break all of the commandments, because, if God was evil, then his commandments should be broken, right? Different Gnostics believed that childbirth was something that should be avoided because you would just be trapping more souls on earth, right? So they engaged in, what would be considered very off-limits type of sexual activity, such as oral and, I don't really know how to say this while live without, social media getting mad at me, but going in through the outdoor, different ways of having intercourse to avoid procreation. And so these Gnostics were considered very heretical by the church because, they viewed God as being evil, and for many different reasons as well. But we're going to see that their system was actually highly, highly intelligent and revolved around this idea of gnosis and understanding reality and experiencing divine realms to be able to liberate themselves from the prison of matter to escape from this evil god. But anyway, this is just a real quick rundown. We're going to look at a lot more of this as we continue. Remember, we are reading from Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I want to remind you, this book was written in 1928. However, it wasn't until 1945 that we found the Nag Hammadi texts in Egypt. And the Nag Hammadi texts in Egypt is where we came to most of our knowledge, a huge part of our knowledge of what Gnosticism was. So Manly P. Hall actually wrote this prior to that discovery. So keep in mind that even what we're going to read today, Manly P. Hall had a very limited knowledge of what Gnosticism was, but it's still very interesting. But in the future, I'll do more videos to update it and give you even more information about what Gnosticism is. And you can see, let me show you just the page that we will be looking at here. Here is the section, and you can see this excellent imagery of Abraxas, which we will be discussing more as well, because Abraxas appears in Gnosticism. And for those of you who know Hyperianism, we use Abraxas to represent the absolute, which is God that is all of us together. We are Abraxas. We are the absolute. And our goal is to make the absolute conscious through us and awaken Abraxas on earth through us. Now, we are going to start reading this. But remember, guys, I want to remind you, on December 24th, that's Christmas Eve, we are having an anti-Christmas, very, Gnostic sort of thing to do. We are having an anti-Christmas drunk Bible reading on December 24th, and it's going to be really good, so make sure you're there. I have a lot planned. Some of the things that I have planned are actually kind of making me nervous because I don't know how it's going to go, but it's going to be good, so make sure you are there. Once again, remember, that's December 24th. We're having an anti-Christmas drunk Bible reading, 4 p.m. Pacific time on Christmas Eve, so make sure you are there. So we're going to start reading. Here we go. The Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies, Part 2. The entire history of Christian and pagan Gnosticism is shrouded in the deepest mystery and obscurity. And remember, this was written in 1928 by Manly P. Hall, and it was in 1945 that we found the Nag Hammadi texts in Egypt that even gave us a plethora of information about the Gnostics that wasn't available previously. But let's continue. Gnosticism is shrouded in the deepest mystery and obscurity. For while the Gnostics were undoubtedly prolific writers, little of their literature has survived. They brought down upon themselves the animosity of the early Christian church. And when this institution reached its position of world power, it destroyed all available records of the Gnostic cult. So, when the Christian church reached its position of world power, it destroyed all records of Gnosticism. But it was good that we were able to uncover, again, in the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt in 1945, we got some more information. They missed some texts. But however, the name Gnostic means wisdom or knowledge and is derived from the Greek gnosis. Now, do you see already a difference between, regular Christianity that is just based on faith and subservience and submission, where the very name Gnostic means wisdom and knowledge. And we're going to see that even though it is very, very symbolic and metaphorical, it's highly philosophic, highly intelligent, embedded with hidden meanings. The members of the order claim to be familiar with the secret doctrines of early Christianity. They interpreted the Christian mysteries according to pagan symbolism, their secret information and philosophic tenets. They concealed from the profane and taught to a small group only of especially initiated persons. So the secret information was protected and taught only to a select few. We're seeing this trend within these ancient secret societies. Now, Simon Magus, the magician of New Testament fame, is often supposed to have been the founder of Gnosticism. If this be true, the sect was formed during the century after Christ and is probably the first of the many branches which have sprung from the main trunk of Christianity. Everything which the enthusiasts of the early Christian church might not agree, they declared to be inspired by the devil. That Simon Magus had mysterious and supernatural powers is conceded even by his enemies, but they maintained that these powers were lent to him by the infernal spirits and furies which they asserted were his ever-present companions. So, it is claimed here that Simon Magus was the founder of Gnosticism. However, there are many who believe that Gnosticism is much, much, much older. Depends how you define Gnosticism as well. And Simon Magus was claimed to be an individual of great and immense power. Even his enemies, the Christian church, agreed that Simon Magus had great power, but they claimed that they got his power from the devil. Undoubtedly, the most interesting legend concerning Simon is that which tells of his theosophic contests with the Apostle Peter, while the two were promulgating their differing doctrines in Rome. According to the story that the church fathers have preserved, Simon was to prove his spiritual superiority by ascending to heaven in a chariot of fire. he was actually picked up and carried many feet into the air by invisible powers. When St. Peter saw this, he cried out in a loud voice, ordering the demons, spirits of the air, to release their hold upon the magician. The evil spirits, when so ordered by the great saint, were forced to obey. Simon fell a great distance and was killed, which decisively proved the superiority of Christian powers. This story is undoubtedly manufactured, as it is only one out of many accounts concerning his death, few of which agree, as more and more evidence is being amassed to the effect that St. Peter was never in Rome. Its last possible vestige of authenticity is rapidly being dissipated. So, Simon Magus was claimed to be the founder of Gnosticism. That can be disputed, as I mentioned earlier. But anyway, you see the Christian church trying to have this smear campaign about Simon Magus by concocting this story that Simon Magus sort of battled Peter, and that Simon Magus lifted himself up into the air, and Peter told the demons to release their hold, and so Simon Magus can crash into the earth and was killed. And this story was promulgated by the church to try and, show that Christianity was superior. Again, always with this propaganda. That Simon was a philosopher, there is no doubt, for wherever his exact words are preserved, his synthetic and transcending thoughts are beautifully expressed. And you can still read some texts that are written by Simon Magus, and they are very interesting indeed. The principles of Gnosticism are well described in the following verbatim statement by him, supposed to have been preserved by Hippolytus. To you, therefore, I say what I say, and write what I write, and the writing is this: of the universal eons, periods, planes, or cycles of creative and created life in substance and space, celestial creatures, there are two shoots without beginning or end, reigning from one root, which is the power of invisible, inapprehensible silence, bethos. Of these shoots, one is manifested from above, which is the great power, the universal mind ordering all things, male, and the other is manifested from below, the great thought, female, producing all things. Hence, pairing with each other, they unite and manifest the middle distance, incomprehensible air, without beginning or end. In this is the Father who sustains all things and nourishes those things which have a beginning and end. By this we are to understand that manifestation is the result of a positive and negative principle, one acting upon the other, and it takes place in the middle plane or point of equilibrium called the pleroma. This pleroma is a peculiar substance out of the blending of the spiritual and material aeons. Now, so real quick, here we see Simon Magus, having a very interesting insight, talking about the universal mind ordering all things according to a positive and negative forces. And, this is a very intelligent insight for the time of its writing. And, as we know in Hyperianism, we are the absolute, Abraxas, the one mind, individuated through a multiplicity of monads, and all, balanced through frequencies, both positive, negative, real, and imaginary, with regard to mathematics, mathematical frequency information, Fourier basis waves. So we can already see an interesting connection in these early writings. Now, I want to make it clear here, once again, Manly P. Hall wrote this in an early time, and Manly P. Hall does tend to make mistakes. I want to make this clear. But what the pleroma actually is, the pleroma is the true reality, the realm of divine light. So in Gnosticism, the pleroma is the realm of divine light. So out of the pleroma was individualized the demiurgus, the immortal mortal, to whom we are responsible for our physical existence and the suffering we must go through in connection with it. In the Gnostic system, three pairs of opposites are called syzygies, emanated from the Eternal One. These, with himself, make the total of 7. The 6 eons, or living divine principles, were described by Simon Magus in the Philosphumena in the following manner. The first 2 were mind and thought, nous and epinoia. Then came voice and its opposite name, and lastly reason and reflection. From these primordial 6, united with the eternal flame, came forth the eons, who formed the lower worlds through the direction of the Demiurgus. How this first Gnosticism of Simon Magus and Menander, his disciple, was amplified and frequently distorted by later adherents of the cult must now be considered. So, here we have this idea, and you can see, this difference now. Just look at this system here. We're having an interesting, intelligent philosophical system put forth, as contrasted to this sort of blind faith of Christianity. We have in Gnosticism these principles, or aeons, these principles of mind and thought, voice and name, reason and reflection, and united within the eternal flame. And through this were the creation of the lower worlds. Now, the school of Gnosticism was divided into 2 major parts, commonly called the Syrian cult and the Alexandrian cult. And these schools agreed in essentials, but the latter division was more inclined to be pantheistic, while the former was dualistic. While the Syrian cult was largely Simonian, relating to Simon Magus, Simonian, the Alexandrian school was the outgrowth of the philosophical deductions of a clever Egyptian Christian, Basilides by name. And I have to look up the pronunciation of this, if it's Basilides or Basileides. Most likely it's Basileides, who claimed to have received his instruction from the Apostle Matthew. Like Simon Magus, he was an emanationist with Neoplatonic inclinations. In fact, the entire Gnostic mystery is based upon the hypothesis of emanations as being the logical connection between the irreconcilable opposites, absolute spirit and absolute substance, which the Gnostics believe to have been coexistent in eternity. Some assert that Basileides was the true founder of Gnosticism, but there is much evidence to the effect that Simon Magus laid down its fundamental principles in the preceding century. So, you can see that there are many different schools of thought, many different types of Gnosticism. And again, I just want to emphasize for any Gnostics that may be watching this, please remember this was written by Manly P. Hall before the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library. The Alexandrian Basileides inculcated Egyptian Hermeticism, Oriental occultism, Chaldean astrology, and Persian philosophy in his followers, and in his doctrines sought to unite the schools of early Christianity with the ancient pagan mysteries. To him is attributed the formulation of that peculiar concept of the deity which carries the name of Abraxas, and as we know, Abraxas is very important in Hyperianism. In discussing the original meaning of this word, Godfrey Higgins, in his Celtic Druids, has demonstrated that the numerological powers of the letters forming the word Abraxas, when added together, result in the sum of 365. The same author also notes that the name Mithras, when traded in a similar manner, has the same numerical value. Basileides caught that the powers of the universe were divided into 365 eons, or spiritual cycles, and the sum of all these together was the Supreme Father, and to him he gave the Kabbalistical appellation Abraxas as being symbolical of his divine powers, attributes, and emanations. Abraxas is usually symbolized as a composite creature with the body of a human being and the head of a rooster, and with which each of his legs ending in a serpent. C.W. King, in his Gnostics and Their Remains, give the following concise description of the Gnostic philosophy of Basileides, quoting from the writings of the early Christian bishop and martyr, Saint Irenaeus. He asserted that God, the uncreated eternal Father, had first brought forth nous, or mind. This is the logos, word. This again, phronesis, intelligence. From phronesis sprung Sophia, wisdom, and dynamis, strength. So again, do you see, the difference between early Christianity and Gnosticism? We have being it based on mind, logos, intelligence, wisdom, strength. In describing Abraxas, C.W. King says, Bellarmine considers the composite image inscribed with the actual name Abraxas to be a Gnostic pantheos representing the supreme being, with the 5 emanations marked out by appropriate symbols from the human body. The usual form assigned to the deity spring the 2 supporters, nous and logos, expressed in the serpents, symbols of the inner senses, and the quickening understanding, on which account the Greeks had made the serpent the attribute of Pallas. His head, that of a cock, represents phronesis, that bird being the emblem of foresight and vigilance. His 2 arms hold the symbols of Sophia and dynamis, in the shield of wisdom and the whip of power. So real quick, I want to show you, again, this image of Abraxas, if you can see here. So here we have Abraxas being formed. Now you can see that here we have the corner of the sun and the moon. And the reason why we have the sun and the moon is because Abraxas is the synthesis of opposites. So we have the forces of light and dark. And he has here the shield of wisdom and the whip of power. And real quick, also I want to say that he is represented as having the head of a rooster, but personally, and I think that is something that needs to be updated, and since Abraxas is central to Hyperianism, we will be updating the image of Abraxas with something more contemporary. Now, and you can see my sort of throwback to Abraxas with the symbol that I wear myself of the 2 intertwined serpents, representing that portion of the dualistic nature of Abraxas, the dialectic, and so much more. A lot is embedded in this symbol. Now, I want to recall that if you want to know more about Abraxas, watch my video called The Secret God the Church Doesn't Want You to Know About, where we discuss Abraxas. Check that out. Also, check out my readings on Carl Jung's 7 Sermons to the Dead, also on my channel, where we talk all about Abraxas. And I want to emphasize here that in Hyperianism, Abraxas is our symbol for the absolute. And I'm going to show you, for those who are unfamiliar with Hyperianism, each and every one of us is an eternal mind, okay? Each and every one of us is an eternal mind called a monad. And let me show you real quick that... Oh, just one moment here. Let me find my images. I should have had these ready, but here we go. Okay, again, this is for those who may be new. You are not a body. What you are is an eternal mind that we call a monad. And this can be represented by the symbol of a circle, okay? So that's what you are, that's what I am, that's what all of us are. Each one of us is an individual mind, an eternal mind known as a monad. Now, the absolute is, we symbolize with a circle of circles, and so you can see it's both one and many at the same time. It is a network, okay? It is a network, a collective mind. That is what the absolute is, and that is what we usually refer to as Abraxas. Abraxas is the one mind that we are, and Abraxas is right now unconscious. But Abraxas comes to consciousness through us, as we become aware of ourselves as the absolute. So as we become aware of ourselves as the absolute comes to consciousness through us, because we realize that we are the absolute. We become conscious of ourselves as the absolute. Since we are the absolute and we are becoming conscious, the absolute becomes conscious through us. That is the opening of the great eye. And it is the goal of Hyperianism to have Abraxas become conscious on earth. How does Abraxas become conscious on earth? Through us. The absolute becomes conscious on earth through us as we become conscious and aware of ourselves as the absolute. And that is how we will establish our kingdom of God, a divine society here on earth, as we become God incarnate, God on earth, God incarnate, the true Christs, the true Christos, the true gods on earth, as we establish our true kingdom and we realize that we are the creators and the destroyers and can shape this world into our image. And so Abraxas is the absolute mind that is currently unconscious but beginning to wake up and come to consciousness through us as Hyperians. And it is the unification of all opposites of light and dark and into reason. It is the dialectical culmination led by logic and reason beyond good and evil, as Nietzsche would say, a revaluation of all values beyond good and evil. Abraxas is beyond good and evil. Once again, check out my video on the 7 sermons to the dead for, a big discussion on Abraxas. And So all that is important to understand. It's a very small piece and taste of Hyperianism. Now, the Gnostics were divided in their opinions concerning the Demiurgus, or the creator of the lower worlds. He established the terrestrial universe with the aid of 6 suns, or emanations, which he formed out of and yet within himself. As stated before, the Demiurgus was individualized as the lowest creation out of the substance called pleroma. One group of the Gnostics was of the opinion that the Demiurgus was the cause of all misery and was an evil creature, and they associated this Demiurgus, this satanic evil creature, with the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Bible. Demiurgus was the cause of all misery, an evil creature who, by building this lower world, the world of matter, had separated the souls of men from truth by encasing them in mortal vehicles, bodies, avatars. The other sect viewed the Demiurgus as being divinely inspired. Some Gnostics were of the opinion that the Jewish God, Jehovah, was the Demiurgus. This concept, under a slightly different name, apparently influenced by medieval Rosicrucianism, which viewed Jehovah as the Lord of the material universe, rather than as the supreme deity. Mythology abounds with the stories of gods who partook of both celestial and terrestrial natures. Odin of Scandinavia is a good example of a deity subject to mortality, bowing before the laws of nature and yet being, in certain senses at least, a supreme deity. So, now let's look at the Gnostic viewpoint of Christ. And again, I want to emphasize once again, Manly Paul does tend to get some things incorrect, like with his regard to the idea of the pleroma and whatnot. But remember, this did come out before the Nag Hammadi scriptures were discovered, so we'll cut him some slack. Now, just to give sort of a recap, basically what the Demiurgus is he is not the true God, but the Demiurgus sort of thinks that it's the true God. So the Demiurgus, who the Gnostics associated with the God of the Old Testament, of the Bible, creates this material world, which is sort of like a deformed sort of creation that mimics the true pleroma, but is sort of this shadow of it. And then he takes souls, divine sparks from the pleroma, traps them in matter, bodies, to power and give life to his creation. And then so it's the Gnostics' goal to break from this prison planet of divine of matter created by this evil god to return to the true realm of the pleroma of divine light. And they want to do this through the process which they call Gnosis. Gnosis meaning knowledge. Now, basically, this is very, very similar to Hyperianism. Gnostics, remember, believed in reincarnation as well. Gnostics believed that, if you died, your soul, your divine spark would just be pulled right back into this prison of matter until you achieved Gnosis. So you'd be caught in this cycle of reincarnation until you achieved Gnosis and could finally go to the realm of divine light. Now, in Hyperianism, we can associate the pleroma with the source, or the frequency singularity. In the material realm is the holos. Now, basically what we are trying to do, rather than, we're not really trying to escape from reality, but what we are doing is creating the kingdom of God on earth, in that we realize that this world can be shaped through us. And yes, right now it is a prison and it is a hell. That's because the current lords of this earth, the rich billionaire class, have transformed it into a hell and don't want you to realize your true divinity. Mainstream religion locks your divinity as well, and atheistic scientific materialism also locks away your divinity. So, the real evils of this world are mainstream religion, the billionaire class, and scientific atheistic materialism. And that is what is sort of keeping you chained from realizing your divinity. So these systems must be abolished and be replaced. The billionaire class, must be abolished. We must have a meritocratic system. We must replace irrational faith-based religion with logic and reason, and we must replace scientific atheistic materialism with ontological mathematics, rationalism, reason. And through this, we will be able to fully awaken to what we truly are, realize that we exist in a shared dream, that we are the absolute, that we are the awakening of Abraxas, and we will be able to finally create a unified world, create that network mind, that collective mind, and begin to shape reality and claim our rightful place as the true gods of this world and all reality. The Gnostic viewpoint concerning the Christ is well worthy of consideration. This order claimed to be the only sect to have actual pictures of the divine Syrian. While these were, in all probability, idealistic conceptions of the Savior based upon existing sculpturings and paintings of the pagan sun gods, they were all Christianity had. To the Gnostics, the Christ was the personification of nous. Remember, nous means mind. So to the Gnostics, the Christ was the personification of mind, the divine mind, and emanated from the higher spiritual eons. He descended into the body of Jesus at the baptism and left it again before the crucifixion. The Gnostics declared that Christ was not crucified, as the divine nous could not suffer death, but that Simon, the Cyrenian, offered his life instead, and that the nous, by means of its power, caused Simon to resemble Jesus. Irenaeus makes the following statement concerning the cosmic sacrifice of the Christ. When the uncreated, unnamed Father saw the corruption of mankind, he sent his firstborn nous, or mind, into the world in the form of Christ, for the redemption of all who believe in him, out of the power of those that have fabricated the world, the Demiurgus and his 6 sons. He appearing amongst men as the man Jesus, and wrought miracles. The Gnostics divided humanity into 3 parts: those who, as savages, worshipped only the visible nature, those who, like the Jews, worshipped the Demiurgus, and lastly themselves or others of a similar cult, including certain sects of Christians who worship nous, mind, Christ, and the true spiritual light of the higher eons. So do you see this association with Christ being symbolic for mind? After the death of Basileides, Valentinus became the leading inspiration of the Gnostic movement. He still further complicated the system of Gnostic philosophy by adding infinitely to the details. He increased the number of emanations from the Great One, the Abyss, to 15 pairs, and also laid much emphasis on the Virgin Sophia, or wisdom. In the Book of the Savior, parts of which are commonly known as the Pistis Sophia, may be found much material concerning the strange doctrines of eons and their strange inhabitants. So do you see how, again, we have Sophia, which means wisdom, and Christ being associated with nous, or mind. Do you see how this emphasis on wisdom, Sophia, nous, mind, gnosis, knowledge, which is a huge difference from Christianity, and all these hidden metaphors and symbols dealing with mind, knowledge, wisdom. You see all of this hidden away in there. James Freeman Clarke, in speaking of the doctrines of the Gnostics, say, "These doctrines, strange as they seem to us, had a wide influence in the Christian church. Many of the theories of the ancient Gnostics, especially those concerning scientific subjects, have been substantiated by modern research. Several sects branched off the main stem of Gnosticism, such as the Valentinians, the Ophites, and the Adamites. After the 3rd century, their power waned, and the Gnostics practically vanished from the philosophic world. An effort was made during the Middle Ages to resurrect the principles of Gnosticism, but owing to the destruction of their records, the material necessary was not available. Even today, there are evidences of Gnostic philosophy in the modern world, but they bear other names and their true origin is not suspected. Many of the Gnostic concepts have actually been incorporated into the dogmas of the Christian church, and our newer interpretations of Christianity are often along the lines of Gnostic emanationism." So here we have this very interesting inversion, this heretical version of Christianity called Gnosticism. And once again, I want to emphasize, this was written in 1928 before the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, and Manly P. Hall keeps saying how we don't know much about the Gnostics because they practically vanished. Their works were destroyed. But now, later, the Nag Hammadi in Egypt was discovered, which shone a huge light onto what the Gnostics were about. So in the future, look forward to me. I'm going to put out videos talking about Gnosticism and how we know a lot more about it now regarding these lost texts that were found. So now we move on to the mysteries of Asar-Hapi. The identity of the Greco-Egyptian Serapis, known to the Greeks as Serapis and the Egyptians as Asar-Hapi, is shrouded by an impenetrable veil of mystery. Now, remember, we're talking about. Remember this. We just talked about Gnosticism, but this whole, this is continuing our discussion of the hidden history of ancient secret societies. Gnosticism being one of them, and now we're moving on here to another. So, while this deity was a familiar figure among the symbols of the secret Egyptian initiatory rites, his arcane nature was revealed only to those who had fulfilled the requirements of the Serapic cultus. Therefore, in all probability, excepting the initiated priests, the Egyptians themselves were ignorant of his true character. So far as known, there exists no authentic account of the rites of Serapis, but an analysis of the deity and his accompanying symbols reveals the salient points. In an oracle delivered to the king of Cyprus, Serapis described himself thus: "As a god I am, such as I show to thee. The starry heavens are my head, my trunks the sea. Earth forms my feet, mine ears the air supplies. The sun's far darting, brilliant rays, mine eyes." And isn't that really beautiful, talking about, this poetry, this verse is a beautiful representation of pantheism. Remember, Hyperianism isn't pantheistic, it's panentheistic. Pantheism says that God is the natural world, the physical world. Hyperianism says that God is the natural world and beyond the natural world, being mind. And that's what we are, that we are a divine mind that then creates the natural world as our body. The universe is our body. We are the divine mind, and the universe is our body. As above, so below. As we are individual eternal minds, and avatars are bodies for our individual eternal minds, monads, the universe is the body of the one divine mind, which is us, as a collective, as the absolute. As above, so below. So, the body of the absolute, which is all of us, is the universe, the physical universe. The body of each one of us as individual eternal minds are each of our avatars. And remember, if you want to understand Hyperianism, make sure you understand our triadic perspective of avatar, monad, and absolute. That is key. Make sure you understand it. So anyway, this beautiful sort of lyric here. As God, I am such as I show to thee. I am what you see. I am what I show to thee. The starry heavens are my head. My trunk is the sea. Earth forms my feet. Mine ears the air supplies. The sun's far darting brilliant rays, mine eyes. So, several unsatisfactory attempts have been made to etymologize the word Serapis. Godfrey Higgins notes that Soros was the name given by the Egyptians to a stone coffin, and Apis was Osiris incarnate in the sacred bull. These two words combined result in Soros Apis, or Serapis, the tomb of the bull, but it is improbable that the Egyptians would worship a coffin in the form of a man. Several ancient authors, including Marcobius, have affirmed that Serapis was a name for the sun, because his image so often had a halo of light about its head. In his Oration upon the Sovereign Sun, Julian speaks of the deity in these words. O Jove, one Pluto, one sun is Serapis. In Hebrew, Serapis is seraph, meaning to blaze out or to blaze up. For this reason, the Jews designated one of their hierarchies of spiritual beings seraphim. The most common theory, however, regarding the origin of the name Serapis is that which traces its derivation from the compound Osiris Apis. At one time, the Egyptians believed that the dead were absorbed into the nature of Osiris, the god of the dead. While marked similarity exists between Osiris Apis and Serapis, the theory advanced by Egyptologists that Serapis is merely a name given to the dead Apis or sacred bull of Egypt is untenable in view of the transcendent wisdom possessed by the Egyptian priestcraft, who in all probability used the god to symbolize the soul of the world, anima mundi. The material body of nature was called Apis. The soul which escaped from the body at death was the enmeshed with the form during the physical life was designated Serapis. So here we have the idea that the material body of nature, the physical world, was called Apis, and then the soul enmeshed with form during physical life was designated Serapis. C.W. King believes Serapis to be a deity of Brahmanic extraction, his name being Grecanized or Grecianized from Grecianized form of Ser Ada or Sripa, two titles ascribed to Yama, the Hindu god of death. This appears reasonable, especially since there is a legend of the effect that Serapis, in the form of a bull, was driven by Bacchus from India to Egypt. The priority of Hindu mysteries would further substantiate such a theory. Among other meanings suggest that the words Serapis are the sacred bull, the sun in Tarsus, the soul of Osiris, the sacred serpent, and the retiring of the bull. The last appellation has referenced the ceremony of drowning the sacred Apis in the waters of the Nile every 25 years. There is considerable evidence that the famous statue of Serapis in the Serapeum at Alexandria was originally worshipped under another name at Sinope, from which it was brought to Alexandria. There is also a legend which tells that Serapis was a very early king of the Egyptians, to whom they owed the foundation of their philosophical and scientific power. After his death, this king was elevated to the estate of a god. Philarchus declared that the word Serapis means the power that disposed the universe into its present beautiful order. In his Isis and Osiris, Plutarch gives the following account of the origin of the magnificent statue of Serapis, which stood in the Serapeum at Alexandria. While he was pharaoh of Egypt, Ptolemy Soter had a strange dream in which he beheld a tremendous statue which came to life and ordered the pharaoh to bring it to Alexandria with all possible speed. Ptolemy, not knowing the whereabouts of the statue, was sorely perplexed as to how he could discover it. While the pharaoh was relating to his dream, a great traveler by the name of Syzygies came forward, declared that he had seen such an image at Sinope. The pharaoh immediately dispatched Soteles and Dionysius to negotiate for the removal of the figure to Alexandria. 3 years elapsed before the imagery was finally obtained, the representatives of the pharaoh finally stealing it and concealing the theft by spreading a story that the statue had come to life and, walking down the street leading from its temple, had boarded the ship prepared for its transportation to Alexandria. Upon its arrival in Egypt, the figure was brought into the presence of 2 Egyptian initiates, the Eumolpid Timotheus and Manetheo the Sebonite, who immediately pronounced it to be Serapis. The priests then declared that it was equivalent to Pluto. This was a masterly stroke, for in Serapis the Greeks and Egyptians found a deity in common, and thus religious unity was consummated between the 2 nations. Once again, do you see how you can unite deities together? You can unite these 2 deities, and how, the idea here is that these different deities, whether they be Greek or Egyptian or what have you, they all represent archetypal forces. So it doesn't matter what image they take, they all represent the same force. They're just closed in the myth of whatever culture they happen to rise up from. And it's really stupid to, for these people to fight wars with each other over which god is the right god, when really they're all just personifications, anthropomorphisms of forces of nature, forces of mind, archetypal powers, and it's really, really very silly. Several figures of Serapis that stood in his various temples in Egypt and Rome have been described by early authors. Nearly all these showed Grecian rather than Egyptian influence. In some of the body of the god was encircled by the coils of a great serpent, others showed him as composite of Osiris and Apis. A description of the god that in all probability is reasonably accurate is that which represents him as a tall, powerful figure, conveying the twofold impression of manly strength and womanly grace. His face portrayed a deep pensive mood, the expression inclining towards sadness. His hair was long and arranged in a somewhat feminine manner, resting in curls upon his breasts and shoulders. The face, save for its heavy beard, was also decidedly feminine. The figure of Serapis was usually robed from head to foot in heavy draperies, believed by initiates to conceal the fact that his body was androgynous. So, very cool again to have this god being represented by androgyny. Because as we know, truly, we are not male nor female. Us as eternal minds, we're simply frequency singularities. And frequency singularities, they have no gender. They're mathematical information. It's mathematical information. So we have no gender as true mathematical beings. Now we can, express ourselves in our current avatars in any way that we so will. But that's why it's really important to remember, all these people who spread so much hate against LGBTQ and all that, it's so silly because these avatars are just clothes for our minds, and our minds have no gender, and we can express ourselves masculine, feminine, androgynous, neither, some one day, some the next. It's so silly to think that we all have to subscribe to this gender binary. It would be just as silly as saying that, everyone must either wear pink or blue. Everyone can only wear pink or blue, and that's it, for your entire life. And no, it's silly. Gender is just a mode of expression of ourselves. There are through our avatars. Now, so it's very cool to see when androgyny is represented in these god forms. Various substances were used in making the statues of Serapis. Some undoubtedly were carved from stone or marble by skilled craftsmen. Others may have been cast from base or precious metals. One colossus of Serapis was composed of plates of various metals fitted together. In a labyrinth sacred to Serapis stood a 13-foot statue of him, reputed to have been made from a single emerald. Modern writers discussing his image state that it was made of green glass poured into a mold. According to the Egyptians, however, it withstood all the tests of an actual emerald. Clement of Alexandria describes a figure of Serapis compounded from the following elements. First, filings of gold, silver, lead, and tin. Second, all manner of Egyptian stones, including sapphires, hematites, emeralds, and topazes. All these being ground down and mixed together with the coloring matter left over from the funeral of Osiris and Apis. The result was a rare and curious figure, indigo in color. Some of the statue of Serapis must have been formed of extremely hard substances, for when a Christian soldier carrying out the edict of Theodosius struck the Alexandrian Serapis with an axe, that instrument was shattered into fragments and flew from it. And again, do you see the Christian soldiers, again, trying to destroy all this pagan history? We have so much information that was lost. So much information that was lost because of, Christianity destroying all of these very important, the Library of Alexandria, all this important information. It is also quite probable that Serapis was worshipped in the form of a serpent, in common with many of the higher deities of the Egyptian and Greek pantheons. We're often going to see, serpents being serpents are often symbolic for wisdom. Serapis was called Theon Heptagrammaton, or the god with the name of 7 letters. The name Serapis, like Abraxas and Mithras, contains 7 letters. In their hymns to Serapis, the priest chanted the 7 vowels. Occasionally, Serapis is depicted with horns or a coronet of 7 rays. These evidently represented the 7 divine intelligences manifesting through the solar light. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes that the earliest authentic mention of Serapis is in connection with the death of Alexander. Such was the prestige of Serapis that he alone of the gods was consulted in behalf of the dying god. The Egyptian secret school of philosophy was divided into the lesser and the greater mysteries, the former being sacred to Isis, and the latter to Serapis and Osiris. Wilkinson is of the opinion that only the priests were permitted to enter the greater mysteries. Even the heir to the throne was not eligible until he had been crowned pharaoh, when by virtue of his kingly office he automatically became a priest and the temporal head of the state religion. A limited number were admitted into the greater mysteries. These preserved their secrets inviolate. Much of the information concerning the rituals of the higher degrees of the Egyptian mysteries has been gleaned from an examination of the chambers and passageways in which the initiations were given. Under the temple of Serapis were destroyed by Theodosius were found strange and mechanical contrivances constructed by the priests in the subterranean crypts and caverns where the nocturnal initiatory rites were celebrated. These machines indicated the severe tests of moral and physical courage undergone by the candidates. After passing through these tortuous ways, the neophytes who survived the ordeals were ushered into the presence of Serapis, a noble and awe-inspiring figure illumined by unseen lights. Labyrinths were also a striking feature in connection with the rise of Serapis, and E.A. Wallace, in his Gods of the Egyptians, depicts Serapis, minotaur-like, with the body of a man and the head of a bull. Labyrinths were symbolic of the involvements and illusions of the lower world through which wanderers of the souls of man in its search for truth. In the labyrinth dwells the lower animal man with the head of the bull, who seeks to destroy the soul entangled in the maze of worldly ignorance. So here we have, I'm sure you guys have heard of the labyrinth and the minotaur in the labyrinth. So here we have the labyrinth as being symbolic for the material world. And you wandering through the labyrinth are a soul in the material world searching for liberate truth, the truth, because the material world is an illusion. Matter is an illusion. The truth is that we are immaterial entities. So you're wandering through this labyrinth in search of truth, trying to find truth in the illusion of the holos. And the minotaur can represent the animalistic nature, trying to, continuously ensnare, humanity. Once again, Hyperianism, we don't deny our animalistic nature, we embrace it, but we also transcend it simultaneously. So we're not ascetics or anything like that. We're not monks that deny the physical. We're fine with indulgence in the physical, while also transcending it at the same time. Remember, we are Abraxas, beyond good and evil, and Abraxas is all. Abraxas is all reality, both physical and mental, both transcendent and immanent, both above and below. Abraxas is all things, and we are all things. So it's not about denying our physical selves, but being able to transcend it and partake in it at the same time, creating our kingdom upon earth, transforming this world into our brilliant creation. We are here to establish our world, establish our kingdom, to fulfill what our creation is meant to become, what we started at the Big Bang. So in this relation, Serapis becomes the trier or adversary who tests the souls of those seeking union with the immortals. The maze was also doubtless used to represent the solar system, and the bull man representing the sun, dwelling in the mystic maze of its planets, moons, and asteroids. The Gnostic mysteries were acquainted with the arcane meaning of Serapis, and through the medium of Gnosticism, this god became inextricably associated with early Christianity. In fact, the Emperor of Hadrian, while traveling in Egypt in AD 24, declared in a letter to Servianus that the worshippers of Serapis were Christians, and that the bishops of the church also worshipped at his shrine. He even declared that the patriarch himself, when in Egypt, was forced to adore Serapis as well as Christ. The little suspected, you can see that all these different, whether we are talking about Serapis or Christ or whatever, these are just personifications of archetypes. They're just different ways of representing a fundamental feature of existence, or archetypal patterns. The little suspected importance of Serapis as a prototype of Christ can be best appreciated after a consideration of the following extract from C.W. King's Gnostics and Their Remains. There can be no doubt that the head of Serapis, marked as the face, is, by a grave and pensive majesty, supplied the first idea for the conventional portraits of the Savior. The Jewish prejudices of the first converts were so powerful that we may be sure no attempt was made to depict his countenance until some generations after all that had beheld it on earth had passed away. Serapis gradually usurped the positions previously occupied by the other Egyptian and Greek gods and became the supreme deity of both religions. His power continued until the 4th century of the Christian era in AD 385. Theodosius, that would-be exterminator of pagan philosophy, great guy, right, issued his memorable edict De idolo Serapis direndo, when the Christian soldiers, in obedience to this order entered the Serapeum at Alexandria to destroy the image of Serapis, which had stood there for centuries, so great was their veneration for the god that they dared not touch the image, lest the ground should open up at their feet and engulf them. At length, overcoming their fear, they demolished the statue, sacked the building, and finally, as a fitting climax to their offense, burned the magnificent library which was housed within the lofty apartments of the Serapeum. Several writers have recorded the remarkable fact that Christian symbols were found in the ruined foundations of this pagan temple. Socrates, a church historian of the 5th century, declared that after the pious Christians had razed the Serapeum at Alexandria and scattered the demons who dwelt there under the guise of gods, beneath the foundations was found the monogram of Christ's. Two quotations will further establish the relationship existing between the mysteries of Serapis and those of other ancient symbolical peoples. The first, that is from Richard Payne Knight's Symbolic Language of Ancient Art and Mythology, says that Coelum and Terra, that is universal mind and body, were the great gods of the Samothracian mysteries, and the same as the Serapis and Isis of the later Egyptians, the Tatuus and Astarte of the Phoenicians, and the Saturn and Ops of the Latins. So the second quotations is from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. Says Martinus Capella in his Hymn to the Sun, dwellers on the Nile adore as Serapis, and Memphis worships as Osiris in the sacred rites of Persia. Thou art Mithras in Phrygia, Attis in Libya bows down to thee as Ammon, and Phoenician Byblos as Adonis. Thus the whole world adores thee under different names. Basically what Albert Pike is saying is that you have all these different gods, but they're all the same god. They just have different names and different images, but the whole world adores thee under different names, whether it be Adonis or Osiris or whatnot, or Mithras. It's all the same archetype that's being just interpreted through different images and mysteries, which is symbols, which is so stupid when people start destroying each other. And this is why we have to be so careful and start to move away from mythos and step into logos. Start moving away from what Hegel calls Vorstellung, picture thinking, and into reason. Because remember, symbol is a distortion of truth, and we can get reality to what reality truly is. Reality is truly mathematical thought frequency patterns. The Odynic mysteries. The date of the founding of the Odynic mysteries is uncertain. Some writers declaring that they were established in the 1st century before Christ, others the 1st century after Christ. Robert McCoy, 33 Degrees, gives the following description of their origin. It appears from the Northern Chronicles that in the 1st century of the Christian era, Syzygy, the chief of the Aesir, an Asiatic tribe, immigrated from the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus into northern Europe. Caucasus into northern Europe. He directed his course northwestwardly from the Black Sea to Russia, over which, according to tradition, he placed one of his sons as a ruler, as he is said to have done over the Saxons and the Franks. Just different places he went to. He soon made himself master. Okay, and built Sigtuna as the capital of his empire, and promulgated a new code of laws and established the sacred mysteries. He himself assumed the name of Odin, founded the priesthood of the 12 Drotars, Druids, who conducted the secret worship and the administration of justice, and as prophets revealed the future. The secret rites of these mysteries celebrated the death of Balder, the beautiful and lovely, and represented the grief of gods and men at his death and his restoration to life. So after his death, the historical Odin was apotheosized, his identity being merged into that of the mythological Odin, a god of wisdom, whose cult had promulgated. Odinism then supplanted the worship of Thor, the Thunderer, the supreme deity of the ancient Scandinavian pantheon. The mound where, according to legend, King Odin was buried is still to be seen near the site of his great temple at Uppsala. The 12 Drotars, who presided over the Odynic mysteries, evidently personified the 12 holy and ineffable names of Odin. The rituals of the Odynic mysteries were very similar to those of the Greeks, Persians, and Brahmins, after which they were patterned. The Drotars, who symbolized the signs of the zodiac, were the custodians of the arts and sciences, which they revealed to those who passed successfully the ordeals of initiation. Like many other pagan cults, the Odynic mysteries as an institution were destroyed by Christianity. Big surprise there. But the you see how much information and knowledge we've lost because of this? But the underlying cause of their fall was the corruption of the priesthood. Mythology is nearly always the ritual and symbolism of a mystery school. All right, that's, very important to understand. Mythology is nearly always the ritual and the symbolism of a mystery school. They present a myth, but hidden within that myth are secret meanings. The masses usually take the myth to be true, while the initiates are taught the secret hidden meaning. Briefly stated, the sacred drama, which forms the basis of the Odynic mysteries, was as follows. The supreme invisible creator of all things was called Allfather. His regent in nature was Odin, the one-eyed god. Like Quetzalcoatl, Odin was elevated to the dignity of the supreme deity. According to the Dotars, the universe was fashioned from the body of Ymir, the hoarfrost giant. Ymir was formed from the clouds of mist that arose from Ginnungagap, the great cleft in chaos into which the primordial frost giants and flame giants had hurled snow and fire. The three gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, slew the Ymir and from him formed the world. From Ymir's various members, the different parts of nature were fashioned. So you gotta remember, these are myths for different elements of nature or archetypes of mind. And real quick, I want to say, I'm not too shabby at pronouncing Greek names and things like this. However, when it comes to the Odynic mysteries, I'm a little rusty, to say the least, on some of these pronunciations, but I shall endeavor to do my best. After Odin had established the order, he caused a wonderful palace called Asgard to be built on top of a mountain, and here the 12 Aesir, gods, dwelt together, far above the limitations of mortal men. On this mountain also was Valhalla, the palace of the slain, where those who had heroically died fought and feasted day after day. Each night their wounds were healed, and the boar whose flesh they ate renewed itself as rapidly as it was consumed. Balder the Beautiful, the Scandinavian Christ, was the beloved son of Odin. Balder was not warlike. His kindly and beautiful spirit brought peace and joy to the hearts of the gods, and they all loved him, save one. As Jesus had a Judas among his 12 disciples, so one of the 12 gods was false. Loki, the personification of evil. Once again, do you see all the commonalities here in these stories? Jesus and Judas among the 12 disciples, and then we have the 12 gods, and we have Loki. We always have these archetypes of evil, these archetypes of goodness, these androgynous archetypes, you can see that everyone's talking sort of about the same thing clothed in different mythologies and different mythos. Loki caused Hother, the blind god of fate, to shoot Balder with a mistletoe arrow. With the death of Balder, light and joy vanished from the lives of the other deities. Heartbroken, the gods gathered to find a method whereby they could resurrect this spirit of eternal life and youth. The result was the establishment of the mysteries. And do you see the theme of resurrection, he who was slain? The Odynic mysteries were given in underground crypts or caves. The chambers, 9 in number, representing the 9 worlds of the mysteries. The candidate seeking admission was assigned the task of raising Balder from the dead. Although he did not realize it, he himself played the part of Balder. He called himself a wanderer. The caverns through which he passed were symbolic of the worlds and spheres of nature. Do you see again this wandering through, through this maze of nature, being lost within nature, the world, the illusion of the world? The priests who initiated him were emblematic of the sun, the moon, and the stars. The 3 supreme initiators, the sublime, the equal to the sublime, and the highest, were analogous to the worshipful master and the junior and senior wardens of a Masonic lodge. After wandering for hours through the intricate passageways, the candidate was ushered into the presence of a statue of Balder the Beautiful, the prototype of all initiates into the mysteries. This figure stood in the center of a great apartment roofed with shields. In the midst of the chamber stood a plant with 7 blossoms, emblematic of the planars. I don't know if they mean to say planets. I don't know if that's a typo or not. In this room, which symbolized the house of the Aesir, or wisdom, the neophyte took his oath of secrecy and piety upon the naked blade of a sword. He drank the sanctified mead from a bowl made of a human skull, and having passed successfully through all the tortures and trials designed to divert him from the course of wisdom, he was finally permitted to unveil the mystery of Odin, the personification of wisdom. He was presented in the name of Balder with the sacred ring of the order. He was hailed as a man reborn, and it was said of him that he had died and had been raised again without passing through the gates of death. And here we have a photo of the 9 worlds of the Odynic mysteries. You have Asgard, Alfheim, Nilfgaard, Helheim. You have all these different worlds. And so here is the main takeaway to understand here is that all these different things that we're speaking about, these secret societies, is that you can see they all have a lot of commonalities between them, common themes, but they're clothed in different stories and different, and the masses take them to mean one thing, but the initiates take them to mean another. And the important thing to realize is that through this you can get mass distortion and wars and bloodshed. Like, look at all the damage that Christianity did. So it's really important, like I'm telling you, is that through Hyperianism we're able to understand reality truly as it is, the pinnacle of thought. And this is why we have to come to know ourselves through ourselves as self-thinking thought. These using mythology and stories, it's sort of like, a stepping stone that we now have to evolve past. It's like when children are being taught, and you teach young children stories, but when you get older, you actually get to school and you learn real, knowledge. Well, same sort of things to do. This mythos is something that we can leave behind in our past as we understand reality as it truly does. Now, it doesn't mean we have to get rid of myth. Mythos is awesome, and creating, look, I love symbolism as I wear the snake. But the difference is that we recognize the symbol as symbol. So we can have beautiful symbols. We can have beautiful mythos. We can have beautiful rituals. But as long as we understand that they are symbols, that they are mythos, and we can have them and have them enrich our lives, but then realize what reality truly is through logic and reason being the pinnacle of thought, and this will allow us to step on into our divinity, become gods, and then we will be able to create worlds of experiences together. Imagine each and every one of us. You know how today we have people who make music and art. Instead, Imagine constructing your entire world, and instead of listening to someone who makes music or watching someone's art, you can step into the world that they have created. Imagine instead of watching a movie, you could step into an entire created world, and the thrills that you could partake in that world that was developed to provide experience and all these sorts of things. So we have monument. This is what I say. There are so many things that we can be doing. We've barely scratched the surface as humans. Just as when we went from instinctual animals to humanity, we could build cities, and to instinctual animals, that's beyond imagining. As we go from, self-awareness to absolute awareness, forget cities, we'll be able to construct entire worlds, dream worlds. And just as cities is unimaginable to animals, constructing dream worlds is unimaginable to humanity in their current state of self-awareness. But it's possible, my friends. That's why we must raise into absolute awareness. But we can't begin to create dream worlds together until we can master this physical world. So we need to master the physical world and have unity and harmony here on earth and build the kingdom of heaven here on earth and create a meritocratic world. And then once we are so unified, then we will gain the power to be able to construct dream world. So let's get on it, guys. It's time to construct new Terra. Now, next week we are going to be I believe it's next week. We may take some breaks. I'm not sure when, but we're going to be looking at the third part to the hidden history of ancient secret societies. These are all ancient secret societies that we're looking at. We're going to look at the third part. And just real quick, I want to emphasize again that Manly P. Hall, I'm not a huge Manly P. Hall fan. He gets some things wrong. Like I said, about 90% of what he says is correct, but he gets some things wrong from time to time, and he does tend to have an old world order mindset from time to time as well. So I'm not a huge Manly P. Hall fan, but that being said, he does have, he did create this compendium of very important information that is helpful to understand and know. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward, that that just because I'm reading from Manly P. Hall doesn't mean I agree with everything that Manly P. Hall says. Always keep that in mind when we read these things. So we're going to be taking a look at the next part, most likely next week, and I will see you there. So I will see you there, my friends.